Let me give you guys a rundown of how today's going to go. So the goal is to introduce individual mentors to you all, and have some casual Q&A around whatever it is that you would like to inquire about. So this could be related to your venture, your idea, your future and your career path, or even a personal question if one of the mentors has something in common with you that you're interested in. And basically, I'm going to turn it over to the mentors and give them each 2 or 3 minutes to talk to you all, introduce themselves, explain who they are, what their role is, and also what it is that they can provide mentorship around at 1789. So basically, what are the things, mentors, what are the things that you've been talking to students about in your time as a mentor, or things that you would like to talk to students about in your time as a mentor? And while they're doing that, I would like everybody else to be just brainstorming as many questions as you have for these individuals. And then I'll turn it over to the students. And what we've been doing is just having, if you have a question, go ahead and raise your virtual hand. So in the chat screen, I can see that you want the mic, and then I'll basically pass you the mic and you can introduce yourself to the mentors, let them know who you are, especially if you have a venture that you want to plug, please do. I will ask everybody to basically not take more than like 2 or 3 minutes to answer any question, mentors. That way we can keep it flowing and all the students can have a chance to ask whatever it is on their mind. So for those of you who don't know, my name is Kimmy. I work for Innovate Carolina, and I work with Student Ventures. I run the Dreamers Who Do Award, the 1789 Student Venture Fund Awards. If you don't know what those are, email me or go to 1789hub.com or innovate.unc.edu to learn more. A lot of you are 1789 members or CUBE members already, so I'm not going to really dive into all that there is. But if you're new, I'm happy to tell you more. If you want to shoot me an email or chat me in the chat box here, I can send you some more information so that you can become a member as well. So with that, I will turn it over to one of our 3 mentors. Today we have Trevor Scanlon and Liz Chen and Arden Rosenblatt, and they will tell you a little bit more about themselves and what sort of their background is, their area of expertise. And please think of any questions that you have for these individuals and write them down so that when they're done chatting, I have some virtual hands raised. Liz, I will turn it over to you if that works.
Yeah, sounds good.
Your screen is working.
Is my audio working?
Yes, I hear you.
Okay, perfect. All right, so hi everybody, my name is Liz Chen. I serve as design thinking lead for Innovate Carolina. And so most of the time I work with students in either offering them training or technical assistance in how to apply human-centered design or design thinking methods to their work. And so for those of you who aren't familiar with design thinking, it's a creative problem-solving approach, and it really focuses on empathizing with end users or customers, and so creating solutions that are desirable, feasible given technology and cost constraints, as well as viable. So can these solutions stand on their own 2 legs beyond initial seed funding? And so most of the time I spend with students focuses on asking a lot of questions, and many students just come with seeds of ideas. And so we start with who are the intended beneficiaries or users of any solution that you develop, thinking through ways that you can get to know your end users better, and ways that you can involve them as you brainstorm different ways forward and considering many different ideas before settling on one. And so I am happy to talk with students at any stage of your project. And so have office hours, and we'll continue to have office hours this fall. I will also say that I have a dual appointment. So I'm also a professor in the School of Public Health, and I use a lot of human-centered design and design thinking in my own adolescent health research. And as a grad student at UNC, I founded a tech nonprofit with a fellow grad student. And so if you have questions about the nonprofit area and how to leverage university resources to launch nonprofit endeavors. I'm happy to input there. And Kimmy, was there anything else that you wanted in this short spiel?
Nope, I think that's a great start.
Okay, great.
Thank you. Arden.
All right. Hey guys, I just wanted to take a note. I want to reach out to you, Liz, about learning about getting nonprofits started.
Yeah.
All right, I'll just try and remember. Well, hey guys, I'm Arden. Moved to North Carolina about a year and a half ago, going on about a decade in entrepreneurship now. Started my career in New York City in low-income housing redevelopment as an assistant project manager. Then went to grad school out in Pittsburgh. Started a 3D printed toy company, essentially out there. Raised a pretty good seed round, built a good-sized team, and brought the world's first retail 3D printing kiosk to market. So we partnered with folks like Toys R Us and Nickelodeon and Ford Motors and Estee Lauder to do a bunch of cool physical retail 3D printing, personalized product stuff. Sort of winded that down at the end of last year. Moved here, started a role with the SBTDC, which is a free, publicly funded, confidential business counseling service. So I am now the business launch specialist for the Triangle region. Every new company that goes into the SBTDC comes across my desk. And so I am also technically a Keenan Flagler employee, which is how I got looped into 1789. And now on my weekends and my little free time, I'm working on a new low-tech startup, home food gardening kits. So that's my background. And
Ooh, perfect timing for that, actually.
I hope so.
We're all trapped at home, right?
It's a good time, but as I'm sure you guys know, it takes a little bit to get things launched.
Yeah.
But we just shipped our first 10 boxes last week, so we're getting there.
Oh, great. Cool. All right, Trevor.
Cool. Hey everyone, my name is Trevor Scanlon. I graduated from UNC in 2019. I was a computer science major, entrepreneurship and music minors. I got connected or learned about 1789 actually through working at a startup that was out of there for a while called Vinci. It was a startup really focused on community events and engagement using an application to bring everyone together. So I worked on some of their Android development as well as worked on their pitch team and helped kind of give pitches around campus in various different competitions or stuff like that happened around campus. I, like I said, graduated in 2019. When I graduated, I really wanted to kind of stay involved in the entrepreneurship community at UNC. And so I reached out to Kimmy about joining as a mentor and seeing if there was a place where I could be helpful, and realized that my experience with pitching and kind of the learning and reading that I've done in that area could be really helpful to students and to ventures within 1789. So at this point, I'm also actually working on my own startup in my free time, which is a little bit tough because I work full-time at a MetLife in Cary as part of their fee organization, but working on a startup right now that uses virtual reality technology in conjunction with some natural language processing audio analysis in order to help students, young entrepreneurs, specifically focusing hopefully on the entrepreneurship minor at UNC, kind of perfect their pitch in a virtual space, which seems especially applicable now that kind of big classes and getting people together is really tough. So my main focus at 1789 is helping students and new ventures kind of early venture, answering questions of, are they really solving a problem, figuring out what their next steps are of how do they go from just an idea to validating that to an MVP, as well as then obviously working with different groups on their pitch and making sure that they're really getting the right message across.
Great. Thanks, Trevor. So students, as you can see, three very different individuals, very different backgrounds and experiences, and areas of expertise. Let me try to, all right, does anybody want to start us off with a question for maybe a specific mentor or just something general that you'd like to hear from all the mentors about?
I have a question for Trevor. So
Sure.
I'm in the entrepreneurship minor as well. So you were talking about being able to give virtual pitches, especially nowadays. What kind of tips would you have for individuals who are giving those pitches for grants and other things?
In terms of what, like how to make it better, or?
How to give a pitch that's is still engaging while still coming across on a virtual setting, because now they're doing a bunch of pitches. Now they're all virtual. If my the person who's reviewing it is going over it.
Sure. So at least when you're practicing, I mean, some of the key things I focus on while I'm building this MVP and working on this company is focusing on kind of three areas of pitch creation. Is do it in an environment that feels like what you're actually going to pitch in. Find some way to get feedback, and good feedback, even on just general speech mechanics. So your rate of speech, your enunciation, stuff like that, your filler words, which I know that I struggle with using, like, stuff like that. As well as then also be able to practice your pitch over and over. So especially in a virtual environment, I would say, I mean, try and see if you can get somebody on the other end of a call with them, have your slide deck or kind of whatever you want to present, and really give that pitch to them and ask them for totally their honest, unbiased feedback. Tell them, hey, you're not going to hurt me. Anything you get, like any feedback that you can give me is going to be helpful to me, because eventually when you give it to somebody else, you want to have gone through the process and felt like you were giving that pitch so many times that you can do it just automatically and that it doesn't faze you. Generally in pitches, I also like to find a way to engage the audience. So I try not to do that with questions of like, okay, raise your hand if you've ever done X, just because that seems, at least in my opinion, to be pretty contrived. But that might be more applicable in virtual speeches, because it might be harder to give them a physical product or to actually go around and be in the physical space with them. So kind of think of those ways of how can you still engage the audience in kind of an authentic way that helps create the message that you're trying to get across.
Yeah, good question, because I know we're all watching a lot of PowerPoints via Zoom these days. Does any other mentor have anything to add to that? Because I know you both have some experience pitching.
Yeah, Kimmy, I can add a few things. I think that I've benefited from pitch coaching from experts like Tim Flood at the business school. And so things I took away from time spent with Tim include, one, don't bury the lead. And so start really strong and explicitly state or ask for things up front, instead of having the people who are watching your pitch have to sit through 10 minutes of the significance of why your product is important and then wait all the way to the end for you to get to the point. So starting with asks or key takeaways up front. I'm a huge proponent of ending with the question slide, not just only with like questions, question mark, and my email address, but contact information and then a revisiting of key points so that people are looking at that during Q&A. And then as you're asking different people for feedback, like Trevor was suggesting that you do, I find it really helpful when students have specific things they want me to be looking for feedback for instead of general feedback. So if they've sent me ahead of time, Liz, I want you to look at these slides. I'm worried that there's too many words, or does the order of slides 8 through 10 make sense, or should I switch the order for more punch? But instead of opening it up, or in addition to asking for general feedback, I find it most helpful if students guide what I'm providing feedback on.
I think that's all good pitching advice. I would say generally your pitch is like any other sales material. I would think about it in terms of a hook, then a pitch, then an ask. And I would agree, if you don't hook them in 20 seconds, whether it's on Zoom or in person, they're probably going to start checking their texts and thinking about dinner. So you pretty much got to get their attention. I don't know if people are familiar with the Guy Kawasaki 10 slides. I just posted a link. I think that's a good outline for most people. The nice thing on Zoom is you can record yourself. So it's very easy after a pitch to go back and watch it after. And then you just got to do a lot of them, take the punches, get better. And, you know, eventually I think the way to know if you had a good meeting or not is if there's a follow-up meeting. So if there's no next steps after that meeting, it probably didn't go the way you hoped it would. And you just keep tuning and adjusting.
Great, thank you all. Who else has a question? Matthew.
I was going to ask that it seems like all the mentors have a lot of experience in starting a company. So like me and some of my friends, we're currently in the early stages of our idea and what should become a company soon. How soon did you guys pick the next steps into making it official and signing all the legal documents and deciding what type of company you want it to look like?
Arden, do you want to start with that?
Sure, yeah, and I help a lot of folks through this process. For most of you guys, it's an LLC versus C-Corp. And I now have a little experience with both. My first company, we're going to need millions of dollars to even break even. So we knew we were going to raise money. So we basically worked with a lawyer who became a mentor and then became our first investor. And he ended up eating like 50 grand in legal fees over 6 years. So, I mean, generally the idea is most small and lifestyle and local businesses are an LLC. It's very easy. It's a 2-page application. You can file it in 20 minutes and it just creates a company and designates you as the owner. So operationally, that does almost everything you need it to do. The area it falls short is basically raising private equity money. There's no stock in an LLC. So every time you raise money, you have to operate your operating agreement, and essentially it becomes pretty onerous pretty quick. So I know people have taken like 50 grand on an LLC, but pretty soon you switch to a C-Corp. A C-Corp, you know, my old company was a C-Corp. My new company is an LLC, and when I get profitable and I want to raise money, I'll switch to a C-Corp. C-Corp, in my experience, pretty serious to get it to look and feel and smell right. I mean, mine was like 60, 70 pages once you got through the equity, the vesting, the operating agreement, the carve-outs, all that stuff. So I tend to send people to a lawyer, which means it's just a little more of a barrier. Instead of the $127 to file an LLC, it's probably, you know, whatever, $1,000 to get a C-Corp. And I sort of would tell people to be a little wary of lawyers that have a really cheap price and give you boilerplate documents, because that's not a great fit for everyone. Particularly, I like to ask lawyers how they handle the 83B election form, which is more of like a litmus test, but what that is just a form your investors have to file within 30 days that lets them vest their investment for tax purposes up front. So in other words, they taxed on their stock when it's worth nothing, not when it's worth a lot when you exit. So that's a very simple litmus test where if a lawyer doesn't know what that is, they probably don't work with a lot of startups, and I probably wouldn't work with them. So to me, you know, the culture I came from of like going through accelerators, everyone goes straight to a C-Corp because they're getting money thrown at them. And if that's the position you're in, that's awesome. Otherwise, for most companies, if you're not raising money yet, and unless you really have some crazy technology, I mean, you're not ready to raise money pre-revenue, most companies. So I think LLC is probably a good fit for a lot of people, really simple to set up, and we can help you do it.
Thanks, Arden.
That-
Liz or
that
Trevor,
answers
do you
the
have
question.
anything? That's okay. Do you have anything to add based on your own experiences?
Yeah, Matthew, great question. And so my story is a little bit different from Arden's. And so I was part of a team that was in an accelerator program. And at the end of the accelerator, those who pitched in essentially Shark Tank style won, were awarded funds. And it was clear that if we had gotten to the end and were awarded money, that the organization was not going to award to individuals. So in a matter of 8 to 12 weeks, my team had to think through, like, if we get to the end and if we pitch and win, what kind of entity do we want to be? And so we had a lot of questions about fundraising, who would be funding us, how would it appear to others? And our whole thing at the beginning was that we really wanted to make sure that we were accessible, and we would likely end up partnering with K-12 school systems and other nonprofit organizations primarily. And so after doing some interviews and talking with folks with more expertise than we did, it became really clear to us that we needed to be a 501c3 as opposed to one of the for-profit options. And the majority of the funding that we chase are government grants or foundation grants that are earmarked for nonprofit orgs and universities. And so it was a really good fit for us and the projects and the work that we do. It's probably not the case for everybody. And so we knew we'd be boxed out of raising capital in the same way as other for-profit entities, but it did open up revenue from foundations and from individual philanthropists who are specifically looking to fund adolescent health work in the country. So, and in terms of filing the paperwork, we started with LegalZoom, and that was really helpful. As a nonprofit, you will have to form a board and manage the logistics and the politics of that. We specifically put a lawyer on our board of directors. And so throughout the process, and then also as we launched our own tech product and app, it was really helpful to have a lawyer on our board. And so that's one way that you can get legal advice and counsel without necessarily having to pay them a fee. And then, yeah, through LegalZoom and our lawyer, we were able to file the paperwork with the state to get 501c3 designated. And then similarly, we're working with them to file the paperwork with the IRS to get the official 501c3 designation for tax purposes. And again, Innovate Carolina has other supports that we can offer to help you navigate that process. But yeah, I think that depending on your market and where you anticipate funding coming from and the optics of it and where and how you want to sell yourself to others, I think are some of the factors that play into your ultimate decision.
I could bring in some early controversy. I would personally steer everyone away from LegalZoom. They charge you for stuff we'll do for free, and anything we won't do, they're really giving you boilerplate legal documents when, in my opinion, you should be working with a lawyer. So I'm less familiar with the nonprofit side of things, but most of what I've heard of people going to LegalZoom is spending a lot of money they don't need to spend. Would just be my add-on.
So the good news is we also have a new mentor, 1789, and he is a lawyer. So Ford Eubanks is joining us in the next Meet the Mentor session, which will be 2 weeks from today. And he is, I guess, what you call like a triple Tar Heel because he got all the degrees from UNC. And we'll be teaching at the law school in the fall semester, and also will be available for one-on-ones with 1789 members. He's not on the website yet because that's my bad, and I am really fighting with WordPress and Elementor. So also, if anybody wants a job doing the 1789 website, I could use some help with that. So he'll be here for legal advice in the future. And I also want to use that opportunity to plug 79 Student Venture Fund. You are allowed to apply for 79 Student Venture funding that would go towards things like licensing fees and such. So not saying that Ford Eubanks is going to represent you through all of this, but you could bounce this off of him and get some advice and maybe some contacts, and you could price some things out and consider the 79 Student Venture Fund. That opens at the beginning of each semester, fall, spring, and summer. There'll be a 3 to 4 week period of time that application opens up.
Oh yeah, I was just gonna add that yeah, we did apply to that and we got, I think, some money. Yeah.
Great. What other questions from our students? Mary Lacey.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi. Sorry, my Zoom's been kind of acting crazy, but this is more, I think anybody can answer this, but I know, Liz, you said you kind of have workshops and you teach at UNC. Specifically related to COVID, are you having any design thinking sessions for companies that may have been affected by COVID and have to like basically jump back to square one and ask those important questions that you ask through the original process of design thinking with a lens of COVID impact? Because if that's a thing that's going to be offered, that'd be awesome, because I know I fall into the bucket of my company was definitely impacted by COVID. So
Yeah, Mary Lacey, do you want to say just a little bit about it?
Yeah. So I founded my company Eats the Seats this last year, and we operate in sports stadiums. We connect local nonprofits to a simple and reliable fundraising opportunity by staffing concession stands in sports stadiums. So sports and food definitely were two huge industries hit by COVID. And we're supposed to still have football, but I've definitely been trying to think through what this could look like on a long-term scale if our society just, we're living in a pandemic. So if you have any advice on that type of design thinking sessions, or if that's going to be an option, would love to hear your thoughts and any of the other mentors' thoughts on that.
Yeah, thanks, Mary Lacey. I just dropped a link to a website that houses some of the ongoing workshops Innovate Carolina has been hosting over the summer. And so I did a 4-part workshop series a few weeks ago that was specific to design thinking in an era where we are social distancing. And so all of the 90-minute workshops are available asynchronously, so you can watch them at your convenience. But yeah, the short version of the answer to your question is yes, many student teams, faculty teams, both with applied projects and research projects that use design thinking have been upended, because the majority of these methods are, and we envision in-person interaction for all of these things. And so we've had to adjust. And I think the hardest part right now is there are some products and solutions that if the world changes in the next 6 to 12 months and reverts back to something closer to normal, that is important. But there are some products and solutions that at this point are forever changed because of COVID and other things. And so I think that I'm happy to chat, but we can first think through, are you in the first bucket of needing to figure out how to keep going with the version of your idea in the next little while? Or are we really needing to go back and try again now that it's a brand new context? And then from there, once we've understood that, trying to figure out which of the design thinking methods would be best suited to answer other questions, and we figure out the resources and the technology needed for you to access the users that you hope to engage with. And so I recommend that recorded set of workshops just because we did that workshop knowing that so many faculty and staff and now students were working on projects that were really drastically changed in March. And so happy to chat more specifically about your own work offline.
Trevor or Arden, anything to add? Because I know both of you, your current ventures were definitely ideated before pre-COVID, right? So anything really even related to just the pivots that this whole pandemic has caused?
Yeah, so I mean, luckily for me, we're still very much in the MVP development phase. So we weren't, it doesn't sound like we were impacted quite as much as you were, Mary Lacey. But we were really hoping that come this upcoming academic year that we would be able to get into those entrepreneurship minor classes and talk with all the students, have everyone together, be able to show off our products, stuff like that, which now obviously that has all changed because a lot of classes are going to be online. Some students aren't going to be on campus. Kind of a lot of things have changed. So just our process going about doing our research, getting our initial users, getting feedback on that has changed. But luckily for us, for us at least, the actual product itself has not changed drastically at this point, although that's not to say that it won't change drastically in the future. But as to your question, I know that you're asking specifically about virtual design thinking workshops, which it's honestly, Liz, I might come and join one of those. But if anybody wants help on thinking through their early stage idea, where to go next, or pitch, or kind of pitch this, always feel free to reach out to myself, and I'm sure the other mentors feel the same. But email us, set up a time to have a Zoom call. Just because things aren't in person doesn't mean we would still very much like to help you all.
I would just add, I think coming from a sort of lean and customer-driven development perspective, I'm not sure much changes in the early stage process. So I would say, first of all, for a startup, your goal is not really to be a mature company. Your goal is just to really find some repeatable sales channel that you can kind of dump money in and pull more money out. So generally the idea is finding a passionate early adopting niche that you can pump to. So the way you do that, through a human-centered, customer-driven approach is really understand a day in their life, understand their problems and their alternative solutions and where that's falling short. And I don't think a lot of that changes. I think some of the alternative solutions and the channels they go through and the ways they think about it might change while we're in quarantine. But at the end of the day, I think if you are sort of laser focused on who's my customer, what's the number one problem they're facing, and what's the one thing I can do better than anyone else to solve that problem, I think that'll give you a true north for all these tough decisions. I also, I don't know if, things take time. A lot of this, I wanted to add to the other question, how long did that stuff take? I mean, my new company, we're just selling seeds. So even that took 3 months to LLC, which, when do you file? I would say when you have operations. Any contracts, any revenue, any obligations, I would do that under an entity. So it took us about 3 months from filing to shipping. I mean, our last company took 9 months just to get an MVP out, and we had, $100,000 funding by the time anyone ever saw anything from us. So I'd be a little wary about, getting too crazy, just kind of pivoting for pivoting's sake, and I would stay really laser focused on, what's my next 6-month milestone, and what helps me de-risk my business as quick as possible, and what gets me to that next milestone as quickly and as cheaply as possible.
Great, thanks, Arden. Great points from everyone. I know, Mary Lacey, you have a pretty unique situation since it is sporting events and large gatherings. So definitely schedule some one-on-one chats with the mentors for advice on that. It's interesting because the current environment has like affected everyone in different ways, and some people in the early stages, like Arden was saying, it doesn't appear. It actually appears to have maybe like motivated, or maybe the just the change in everybody's daily schedule has allowed them to have more time, because I know that from the student perspective at UNC, there was nothing slowed down as far as any active members at 1789, people applying for funding. In fact, we saw a huge increase in the downstairs office at Innovate Carolina. The Office of Technology Commercialization has actually seen a pretty big uptick in activity as well. So on the faculty side, there's still lots of ideas flowing and work being done. So that's always great to hear about.
And if you haven't applied for PPP or pandemic unemployment insurance, if you don't qualify for PPP, but you sound like you might qualify if you had some kind of payroll before March or whatever the deadline was. And for what's worth, SBTDC is pandemic frontline response, so we can help anyone with PPP or EIDL or any of these programs.
So Arden, can you maybe talk more about what's still available? What does that process look like? Who qualifies to apply? Because some of them are pretty early on.
Yeah, I can't speak too much because most of my clients by nature don't qualify. If you had payroll before really the pandemic started, I don't remember the exact date, but I think it's in March, then you qualify. So the PPP is free money if you do it correctly, and it's free money to go to your employees. So I think it's like 10 grand per employee. Beyond that, you'd have to work with one of our general business counselors who's much more familiar with those processes than I am. And we actually just hired statewide COVID specialists who their whole job is just helping businesses navigate this process.
Oh, wow. Cool.
So they have the real answers. But anyone who's had payroll before, March, April should check it out.
Okay.
If you started now, it's too late. If I can't go do PPP and hire people, but people who had existing payroll before the pandemic, and then a lot of most people that sort of do their own stuff, like contractors or sole proprietors or single member startups, a lot of those folks will qualify for pandemic unemployment insurance, which is pretty sweet deal. Just a bunch of free money.
Right. Yeah. Not alone.
Yeah. So I would
Great.
check it out. Best grants out there right now.
Other questions from anyone?
I have a quick question.
Sure. Hi, Jackie.
Hi, I'm sorry I don't have my camera on.
That's okay.
But today is one of those days. I hope you can understand.
I do.
Thank you. I have a question with regards to just like designing a good research plan. I'm working with students and the CUBE program manager, and I'm working with 10 student ventures right now, and I'm looking over some of their research plans, and so much we try to emphasize like how important it is to understand your customers, how important it is to understand the solutions, like what else is being done out there, what resources are available to build your venture. And like, I try to put myself in the student's position sometimes too, and just think like that can be a very overwhelming task. Just like that much information, processing, organizing it. And so I'm just wondering, for people who have been in the field for a while now, I'm sure you've picked up these tricks, or not even tricks, maybe not the right word, but like a strategy about how you go about navigating that part of being an entrepreneur. So I don't know if I asked the question perfectly super well, but I hope that you were able to understand what I meant.
Yeah, Jackie, I can start. So I am also a researcher, so I would love to spend endless amounts of time researching, whether it's through like in-person or direct user contact, or through reading peer-reviewed literature, or to learning what other people in the space are doing. So I think it's the most helpful to have deadlines and people to hold you accountable. And so in the real world, you can't just theorize and can't prototype forever. Like at some point, you will need to commit and try some things and move forward and take the information that you do have and turn it into something. And so, especially working with students, I've found that building in checkpoints and then specific deadlines for when different phases of research finish, so that you can ask them like, great, now that you've learned this, what is the next step, is the most helpful, instead of not having an end date in sight.
Thank you.
I would say from my experience, I found it, I totally agree with everything Liz said. And honestly, I have not worked with nearly as many students as I think Liz or Arden might have, but from my personal experience, I've been in that position of forgetting different parts or feeling overwhelmed that there's so much information that I feel that I need to bring together. And I'll remember that, hey, I need to do problem interviews now, but I totally forget about looking for what is the competition. And so then I realized a couple weeks later that, oh man, I have no idea what's here. So it's really helpful to follow a couple kind of blueprints or books that kind of take you through that process. And probably my favorite one is just the Running Lean by Ash Moria. That's probably my favorite book that just kind of takes you through the process of making sure that you're validating everything along the way, that you're talking to the appropriate people, asking the right questions, really digging into their responses, that you're coming up with that MVP, that you're going back and talking with people. So I know from my own personal experience, I found it really helpful to follow a program similar to what is outlined in a book like that.
And then Jackie, building on what Trevor just said, if you are following some sort of process or book, the other tip I would have is just making sure the students are documenting which research activities they're completing and when and with whom, and then the specific findings from each phase, because ideally they will take this, run with it, and great things will happen. And somebody will ask them later on, like, how did you know this X, Y, and Z? Like, how did you get this insight? And it will be really important that they will be able to go back and be like, oh, it's in the first set of interviews we did with these people, this was the recurring theme that we kept hearing. So it comes back to just like organizing, but having processes that you're both following, and then processes for documenting what's happening. And some of the groups that I work with don't necessarily do it in prose form. They found it fine just to do it in Google Slides. So they just have a deck where the first slide describes the research activity, and it might include some pictures. And then the second slide for that particular research activity shows the insights or the takeaways. But it's a nice way to collect that information over time so that somebody has it.
Yeah, Liz, I'm glad that you mentioned the PowerPoint. I was gonna follow up on Jackie's question and see if any of you had, and even the students, just any helpful software or organizational methods, because like Jackie said, it just comes down to just a lot of information that needs to be, saved appropriately so that they can reference it, in Jackie's case, throughout the whole academic year, because they'll be working on the project.
I use Google Drive and MeisterTask just to organize all the information. Those are my go-tos. That's where all of my information is stored. That's where all of my tasks, if I get an idea about something else that I need to do eventually, I go ahead and just write it down, just stick it up there right now, because I know that if I don't, I'm going to forget about it. But Google Drive and MeisterTask are my best friends as I'm working on this.
Yeah, I use Drive, and then for project management and timeline related things, I use Asana. And so probably very similar to the product that Trevor's using, but it's nice because you have a history of what you were doing, who was doing it, and by when, with that. And then in the Google Docs, we do have, I like using Google Sheets to have Excel-like trackers. But again, every team will probably have different wants and needs, but the important thing is that you arrive on something and then use it consistently.
I'm a dinosaur. I just use PowerPoint and email and phone and Google Drive, especially with interns. I've had like 30 interns over the years. And I would probably agree with Liz. They do best when the uncertainty is in how to reach the deliverable, not what the deliverable is. So I find if you give people good constraints and then a little flexibility to run with it, they do well. I also think it's why mentorship's so important. I mean, you could read 100 books and never learn some of the culture of this stuff. And, you know, the truth is this is how people get boxed out, and, you know, where a lot of inequality comes from is just sometimes it's more who you know than what you know. So you guys at UNC are probably on the greener side of that grass. You guys have more opportunity and resources than most folks in the state or country. So take advantage of them.
Yeah. All right, we have about 10 minutes left. Do any students have any last questions? If not, I will turn it over to see if the mentors want to know anything from the students these days.
Hi, I have a question. I was wondering about how, when you have a kind of beginning venture, how soon should you start advertising it and talking about it with the general public? Because on one hand, you want people, especially your intended audience, to start being aware and not for it to kind of come up suddenly, but you also don't necessarily want everybody to like know you're just in the beginning phases and lose confidence perhaps if they don't know where you're going with it. So I would be curious about any insight with that.
Trevor or Arden, do you want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I can answer. So I've always said I always think that from the beginning, even before you start building a product, you always need to be talking to the people that you think are going to use it. And so I think one of the things I've learned is that you can never, as you're building a company, I think, talk about your product too much, or you shouldn't be scared to talk about your product thinking that someone's going to steal it or anything, because they don't have the same drive, the same insights, or necessarily, even if they hear about it, they're not going to have all the kind of inner workings of your idea that you're going to have. But I mean, you should definitely always be talking to people, always getting their feedback on what you're building, asking for their time to interview them about the problem that they're facing. Like Arden said before, always be laser focused on what is their number one problem and how can you solve it better than anybody else, stuff like that. So I would never shy away from taking it public, from talking to people, just in the sense of you want to learn everything that you can about your potential users or customers.
That's helpful. Thank you.
I think that question is where a lot of this lean startup and all that came from. I mean, the lean startup is about these guys spent 8 months at IMView just to finally launch, and they're all freaking out, and then no one even clicked on the landing page and downloaded the software in the first place. So the big punchline of that book was, wow, if we just did a landing page on day one and didn't write a line of code, could we have learned exactly the same thing? There's a lot of stories like that. I like the one from LinkedIn where there was like 4 key features they needed to launch. It was like, you know, the profile, the news feed, the connections list, and some other feature. And eventually Reed, whatever his name is, just, you know, it's crazy, guys, we got to launch. And the punchline there is LinkedIn never added that 4th feature. I couldn't even tell you what it was, but clearly they found out it was not that important. So I know his takeaway, I'm blanking on his name, Reed, whatever, the CEO of LinkedIn. Hoffman. He said launch early enough to be embarrassed by your first prototype. And so that is kind of words of wisdom I've followed. The truth is, if someone could steal your business just by knowing what you do, it's not a good business, probably. Because if you do start to make money, people are going to come after you. I mean, I had public multi-billion-dollar companies shit talking me from people I've never heard, to customers, and had to compete against Autodesk and all these people. And you got to make a pitch. For me, it was, look, these guys want to sell you software. I know how to 3D print for consumers. And if you want to buy their software and have a failed pilot, be my guest. And I won those contracts. So I think, first of all, you have to be realistic that if knowing what you do is enough to put you out of business, that's a real problem. You got to be able to compete with your competition. Sort of lost my train of thought on that one. But yeah, I mean, I would launch early enough. Really, I guess the bigger point is, I think you see these checklists, and here's the MBA checklist and the Lean program and 4 steps to the epiphany and all this. And you sort of feel like, all right, here's the startup checklist. I think the truth is that, you sort of learn after a couple of years, these are all good exercises, but we're not doing it for the sake of doing it. You're really doing whatever's going to move you forward as quick as possible. And usually that means, how can I de-risk my business so I can put money in, or get investors or a bank to put money in? So really the question of a launch that I would ask is, what are you trying to learn? And this MVP, the idea is, what's the quickest, cheapest thing you can get into the market to start de-risking and really understand if the way you see the world is the way your customers see the world. Because at a certain point, interviews are just not going to get you the answers you need. So now on the second iteration, where I'm less caught up personally, and I'm just kind of running with it, it does feel more natural, where you do customer interviews, you learn what you can, you identify the key problems. I know a day in the life. You give me 30 new gardeners, I can tell you what 2/3 of them are pretty much going to say. At a certain point, there's not much more you can learn after that without putting a product in the market, or at least some semblance of a product, or something that's going to test, what this thing looks like in the real world. So, these are all great tools, and the outlines are really good to get you there. The truth is, at a certain point, you're doing whatever moves you forward to that next milestone, that next plateau, and helps you kind of get the assumptions out of your business and really find your way to a proven, repeatable sales cycle. Because then you've got some gold, then you could turn on the money printing machine, and you're in a good place, a much better place than you were previously.
Yeah, thanks, Arden. I'm really glad you asked that, Jessica, because a lot of students share that same concern about what to disclose versus not disclose. And I'm glad that you answered it that way too, Arden. If you go to the 17 Student Venture Fund page and you read the description, you'll see that basically our goal is to give small, or if you've applied and you're like, well, why did I only get this little bit? We want to help support the process that Arden just explained, and we want to help you build that first version, and then we want you to come back and show us what you did with version 1, and then apply for a little bit more money to build version 2, and so on and so forth. So that's the idea behind that funding as well.
Yeah, and so on that note, there's like all these red flags you see with new entrepreneurs. Don't go say, this is $1 billion opportunity, and if we can get 1% of it, we'll all be rich. One of those classic red flags is asking advisors for an NDA, because advisors see hundreds of companies. They're not going to steal your business. They're just trying to be helpful, and no one's going to sign your NDA, frankly, because there's no benefit to us to get legal liability for no reason when we're talking to hundreds of companies. And, in most cases, if you're doing something worth doing, you've got competition. The flip side is, if you don't have competition, I would seriously consider why that's the case. So we've probably seen 3 or 4 versions of your company, and we just can't, we're not going to stop helping other people because we met you first, unless, once you're a board member or investor, or you have some skin in the game, that's a different story. So yeah, you got to be comfortable at some point defining a clear competitive advantage. I like to think of it as an unfair competitive advantage. And you're gonna have to compete on that. There's no way to drive customer acquisition and keep this a secret. That's just not how the world works for 99.9% of companies. unless you're Carbon 3D, who raised.
Yeah, there are a few exceptions.
But you know, I wouldn't think of that as the normal process.
Right. Great. Well, thank you to Liz and Arden and Trevor for taking some time out of your day to log on and answer questions. Also, thanks to Eleanor again for taking beautiful notes. So I'll make sure those get sent out to everyone that registered. And also, so you know, we're putting the recordings on the 1789 website under the resource tab. You click events and hopefully you'll see a link that works. Because again, I'm doing my best. What else did I want to tell you? Oh, I'm going to put a link in this chat right now for session 4 that is going to happen 2 weeks from today. So I hope you'll join us. That'll be the last one for the summer session. And then I'll be working to get a couple things planned for the fall semester, all virtually for 1789 for the foreseeable future. And yeah, if you have any questions, please shoot me an email. And I'll be happy to give you more information about 1789, the process and the community there. And you'll also find email addresses for all 3 of these mentors under the resource tab when you click mentors. A little bio about them, a little headshot, and more information. So reach out for one-on-one sessions so you can get a little bit more in depth about what you have going on. But that's it. Other than that, it was nice to see everyone.
Thank you, Kimmy.
You're
Thank you.
welcome.
Bye-bye.
See ya. Have a good
Thank you
day.
all.
Thank you.
Oh, there's a lot of good information in the chat too, if anyone wants to copy that. There's the books that you guys were talking about. I threw those links in there, and Arden threw some good links in there too. So we'll try to get those in the notes that get sent out.
And anyone could go to sbtdc.org. Taxpayer funded, free services for all NC residents.
Thank you.
Hi guys.
Thanks. Thanks, Arden. See you later.